Welcome to the Sri Lanka is over party. It's time for everybody to let loose and have fun. Because in some parts of the world, insurrection is not such a terrible thing. It's in fact celebrated as a victory in a fight for freedom. Sri Lankans, or what did they used to be called, Ceylonese, I believe during colonial times, they have burst into the official residency of their president. They demand that he's out. He has fled the country, from what we understand. The government is in full collapse. They have destroyed their currency and their economic system. And frankly, there's not that much different about Sri Lanka. When you compare it to a lot of other countries around the world, including the United States. What is the great sin of the Sri Lankan government that is now completely collapsed and is being trampled by its own people, by the people who they have ignored and abused for so long? Well, they printed too much money. They decided that the amount of tax revenue they had coming in was no kind of a restraint on their ability to spend money. So they spent as much as they wanted. They printed the difference. And this is where they find themselves. Sri Lankanomics doesn't look that different than, Turkonomics or Abenomics or Americanomics or even Euronomics, for that matter. And so I must say, as a hard money advocate, it's nice to see the regime in Sri Lanka get its just desserts. It's nice to see a victory against, the global fiat movement, which overtook our planet nearly a century ago. Because Sri Lanka is not a lone Zimbabwe out there in the ether. What's going on in Sri Lanka is going on to a lesser extent in many other countries. The shortages of goods, the increases in the costs of living. It's just that Sri Lanka was such a weaker country to begin with that they broke first. This is what always happens. This is what happened back in the, I would say the 20s, but it's happened throughout human history. Of course, it's much more exacerbated now that we have such a globalized economy and a globalized financial system centered, of course, in the United States. It's not too often I can say this, but from everything I've been able to tell, this revolution in Sri Lanka is not at all tied to any Western money or CIA influence or Chinese influence or Russian influence or anything like that. This seems to be a genuine uprising of people who were tired of getting kicked in the face by their regime. And I hope their courage spreads. We want to see scenes like this all across the world, in the capitals of various countries. Because people should not have to fear their governments. Governments should fear their people. Now, they'll probably be, because I have, vast majority American audience, people will bring up January 6th in the comments and go, oh my gosh, look what happened there. It didn't work out so well for us. We tried what they're doing in Sri Lanka. And my answer to that is no. January 6th was not a serious insurrection. No one thought of it that way. No one was trying to, overthrow the president. Quite the contrary. They wanted to keep the president in power because they thought he won. This is a very different situation here in Sri Lanka. Nobody's disputing the election in Sri Lanka, to my knowledge. The election was presumably well in the past and happened without incident. No, what they're disputing is the performance of the government. They're saying this government is illegitimate because of their actions, not because of, we think they broke some rules here or there. No. They're saying, you people screwed up. You have lost the mandate of heaven, not that they believe in that in Sri Lanka, but I mean, in a colloquial sense. You people have no legitimacy because you're doing a bad job. And so we don't care whether you're elected or not. Get out. Stop ruining our lives. That's the message that is being sent in Sri Lanka. And the people there have gotten to that point because they're in such a dire situation. I mean, people there are going to starve. And they have no recourse left. And frankly, I wish it hadn't gotten this bad for them. I wish they'd been able to get rid of the people in power before it got to this point. And I certainly don't want us here in the West or in the United States to get to a situation that is as bad as the situation in that country before we're able to get these people out of power. And frankly, there's no guarantee. In fact, I think it's probably unlikely at this point that even though the current president has fled, that the new president, whoever's installed in his place, is any better. He might even be worse, just like I said with, Boris Johnson. Okay, sure. They got Johnson out of there, who sucks. But who's going to replace him? Michael Gove? But who knows? Maybe because of the way in which the circumstances surrounding the departure of the now former Sri Lankan president, maybe that'll make the new guy think twice before doing terrible things. Maybe he'll think about, gee, why did the guy before me get overthrown? Maybe I should avoid doing that. If the government really gets the message and they're really scared, because this is a real insurrection in Sri Lanka, they're not going to do petty things like prosecute people for sitting in the president's chair. Remember the people it was way beyond just the people who sat in Nancy Pelosi's chair or took her podium away. They're prosecuting everybody from January 6th. That's a clear sign that they're not afraid of what those people did. They're not afraid of the January 6th folks because they know it wasn't a real insurrection. They're trying to make an example out of those folks and show how dare you disrespect us. They're way beyond worrying about respect in Sri Lanka. At this point, members of the government there are just trying to preserve their own lives. And that's how you get the government to actually do what you want to do. When the regime takes you for granted in your support and thinks that it's beyond the pale for anyone to not support the regime, that's when they do whatever they want. Because they believe in their heart of hearts that they can get away with it and that it is simply uncouth for anyone to disagree. They think that dissent is criminal. Well, I'll tell you what, in Sri Lanka, that's not the way the regime is going to be thinking anymore. Because when you look at scenes like this, you're not going to restore order through brute force. It's not possible at this point. At this stage, force is only going to make the situation worse. The people of Sri Lanka have become ungovernable. And the sooner that happens here in the West, the better, because then we will be able to sooner start working towards getting back on the right track. Because at this point, we're headed off the same cliff as Sri Lanka. We're just a few miles behind them. But considering the strong jobs report that came out this week, stronger than expected, that probably is going to give Powell some more wiggle room to continue hiking, which as far as I'm concerned is a good thing. We want to pop our asset bubble. We don't want to go down as far as Sri Lanka. I think Turkey certainly is in danger of reaching that stage in the next couple of years. But when this next financial crisis arrives in earnest, we'll just have to see what happens. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.